that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View starts right now.
Across America, live, this is Point of View. And now, Kerby Anderson.
Thank you for joining us. We're going to, of course, focus on lots of issues today because it is our weekend edition. We will certainly get into some of these religious liberty cases, which you'll certainly want to know about. Will we have a Schumer shutdown? Looks like maybe that will not happen, but we'll get into some of those details. Lots of protesters. Some of them have shown up at Trump Tower. Of course, we've talked about the threats against Elon Musk and the attacks on Tesla and a number of others. We'll get into the economy. The number of ICE arrests has doubled, and many other topics we will be addressing today. We first of all come back to an individual who's been on the program with us many times before, Jeff Mateer, who is Executive Vice President and Chief Legal Officer for First Liberty. But we also are privileged to have with us today Erin Smith, who also is an Associate Counselor at First Liberty Institute, a graduate of Oklahoma State University, as well as a graduate of Oklahoma City University School of Law. So, Erin, welcome to Point of View.
Thanks for having me, Kerby.
Well, we'll start with Oklahoma. You're from Oklahoma, and this first case, we have information about it on the website, and it involves the Oklahoma State Superintendent Ryan Walters. If you type in his name, you will see multiple articles we've posted over the years. First, getting to know him when he was just a teacher of advanced placement, then became the Oklahoma State Superintendent because he started speaking out against wokeness and all sorts of other things. He's been in the news for some time, but this is a case where you are actually bringing a friend of the court or an amicus court brief to the Supreme Court about this issue of discrimination against a faith-based charter school. Can you tell us more?
Yeah, so we recently filed an amicus brief, as you mentioned, on behalf of State Superintendent Ryan Walters and the Oklahoma Department of Education and the Board of Education as well. And so us and alongside Gibson Dunn filed this amicus brief, basically just explaining to the court what the court already knows, and emphasizing that, you know, Superintendent Walters and the Oklahoma Department of Education want to follow the law and follow what the court has said about the Constitution and about religious liberty. And so what we explain is, you know, you can't discriminate against a religious charter school just because it's a religious charter school. This is a generally available benefit for anyone to apply to run a charter school, and you can't exclude an entity just because it's religious.
Jeff, I was just thinking, you know, we've had problems in California. We've had problems in Maine. We've talked about even a teacher in, was it Connecticut, can't even have a crucifix. But I do believe you won a few Supreme Court cases on this, haven't you?
Yeah, I think we can speak to. I think we can speak to this issue pretty well. I mean, so you know, Oklahoma and in their wisdom decided that they were going to include religious charter schools in their program of charter schools that were not going to exclude someone just because they're religious. And what State Superintendent Walters is well, we've got to include those schools. Well, unfortunately, the Attorney General of Oklahoma, who, by the way, is a Republican in name. We've heard that phrase before, haven't we? Republican in name only, who's opposes it. And it's just, to me, it's just, I mean, I don't know if most Oklahomans know that. I know we've got some friends in Oklahoma listening, but yeah, their attorney general thinks that we should exclude religious schools from participating in an otherwise available government benefit. And what you said, Kerby, is exactly right. Maybe the Attorney General should read Carson versus Macon. He should maybe know that the Lemon test is dead. Maybe read our Supreme Court victory in Kennedy. So there's two Supreme Court cases, First Liberty very, very much involved in, that very, very much speak to this issue. And I think the court has made it very, very clear. If you're going to have a government program, you can't exclude someone simply because they're religious. And the court has said that over and over again, and most recently, emphatically, in our Carson versus Macon case. So I don't know what they're doing in Oklahoma. That makes no sense to me that their own attorney general would be on the wrong side of this issue. But he is, and I believe he's running for governor. So maybe the people of Oklahoma should know something about him.
Yes. And I was just thinking about this, Erin, because we're going to talk about Oklahoma in just a few minutes. We're going to talk about Mississippi. We broadcast in both those states. And most people would say, well, I expected this maybe in Maine, and that was the Carson case. You had one in California. We even had one out of Colorado, which wasn't your case, but it's whether or not you can provide playground material for Christians and non-Christians. And I don't think anybody would have expected out of Oklahoma. You've lived in Oklahoma, so help us out here. What's going on?
I mean, it's shocking. I mean, and this wasn't an act of, the people of Oklahoma. This was the attorney general going out on his own to say, you can't have a religious charter school, which is completely incorrect. I think Jeff gave him a really good reading list of cases that maybe should brush up on. But he finds himself on the opposite side of both the individual in charge of the Oklahoma State Department of Education and the governor and a senator from Oklahoma, Senator James Lankford, also filed an amicus brief in this case in support of the religious charter school. So clearly there's some missed connection here. But yeah, it's shocking that something like this would happen in Oklahoma.
Matter of fact, I was invited to an event with Senator Lankford next week, and I was going to ask him about that. Well, since he's already done an amicus brief, I guess he's up to school. But again, Jeff, this is why you do what you do at First Liberty. We run into individuals that are still convinced that you can't have a Bible club, even though we have all sorts of Supreme Court precedents and laws and everything. We have individuals that say a student can't bring their Bible. And here, of course, we've been talking about a case in which an individual teacher has a really small crucifix, and that's enough to get her in trouble, when it seems to me that we have all sorts of legal precedents that would say you can't discriminate whether she has a religious symbol that you like or don't like. You can't discriminate against an individual on that basis.
Yeah, we can win cases at the Supreme Court, and we certainly have. But if we don't, then, and Kelly does the best, Kelly Shackelford does the best in this. I mean, you can win, but if you don't walk in the freedom that you've been given, then what's the point of the victory? And so, unfortunately, when you have government officials who in some cases are just ignorant, and they don't want to know what the law is. And we run into that occasionally. We will see, usually it's local officials who are they just don't know because they've been told something for 30 or 40 years and they don't realize it. I don't think that's necessarily the case in the case of the Oklahoma Attorney General. One would think that an Attorney General of a state would know about recent Supreme Court opinions, or somebody on his staff would know about recent Supreme Court opinions.
You work for an attorney general. You know how that works, right?
I would. Well, yes, I have, and I will guarantee you, we knew about the Supreme Court. Lieutenant Governor Patrick would be on the wrong issue. Yes, we have to walk in that freedom, the freedom of those Supreme Court victories.
Let's take a break. And again, this is a surprise Oklahoma. You wouldn't guess it, and you wouldn't guess Mississippi. When we come back from the break, again, First Liberty finds themselves dealing with an individual who is blocked from, in an open-air opportunity, preaching the gospel. Again, you can't even make some of this up. But we'll come back and talk about that one briefly, and then we'll get into some of the things going on in the United States Congress. We'll be right back.
This is Viewpoints with Kerby Anderson.
A recent education report illustrates that our public schools are politically skewed. It concluded that the Marxist Howard Zinn's book is used in a fourth of all American classrooms. Educator Larry Sand explains that Zinn's best-selling book, A People's History of the United States, approaches history from a Marxist perspective. Zinn maintained that the teaching of history should serve society in some way, and that objectivity is impossible and it is also undesirable. Zinn even admitted that he wrote his book to create a revolution. If you want to know more about Howard Zinn and his education project, you can follow the link to this commentary. Even better, you might want to obtain the book Debunking Howard Zinn, written by Mary Graybar. I did an hour interview with her on the book a few years ago. Larry Sand concludes that most students are becoming an expert in Marxist dogma, but they aren't learning U.S. history. The American Council of Trustees and Alumni conducted a national survey of college students. It tested them about their basic knowledge of American history and government and found that significant numbers of college students graduate without a basic grasp of the nation's history and political system. He also cites other surveys that come to the same discouraging conclusion. In many cases, foreigners who come to the U.S. to become citizens learn more about our history and government structure than young people who attend our public schools. Why not require high school students to pass the citizenship test? Recently, the governor of Iowa announced a bill that would require high school students to pass the citizenship test to graduate. If the bill passes, Iowa will become the 14th state to adopt such a measure. Our schools aren't teaching history, and what they do teach is often politically skewed. I'm Kerby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
For a free copy of Kerby's booklet, A Biblical View on Socialism, go to viewpoints.info/socialism. That's viewpoints.info/socialism. You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Back once again in studio with me today, Jeff Mateer and Erin Smith. We'll open up the phones in just a few minutes, but thought we'd get to another religious liberty case. And Jeff, I remember the conversation a while back in which, for our listeners in Georgia, we were talking about an evangelist who was allowed to be in a so-called free speech zone, but then it started to rain, and as soon as he went over so he could get out of the rain, well, then that was a violation of his free speech. This one reminds me, and this one, again, out of the state of Mississippi. Who would have made that idea? But Gabriel Oliver, evangelical Christian, likes to share his faith, but apparently in one of the cities there in Mississippi, you're not allowed to do that in an open-air situation, and I thought we believed in free speech.
Apparently not in Brandon, Mississippi, is a short answer to that. And
what is going on here?
Yeah, and so it's you got to, I guess, channel your southern Mississippi, Louisiana accent. It's Olivier. It's Gabriel Olivier.
Olivier,
sorry. Yes,
okay.
like the actor, I guess.
Yes.
Right.
Okay.
Lawrence
I need to be corrected.
But Mr. Olivier is an evangelist, and as part of his ministry, he in Brandon, Mississippi, which is not a metroplex, but they do have an amphitheater, and Pastor Olivier feels called to communicate the gospel, sometimes in a forceful manner, but sometimes people need to hear the gospel in a forceful manner, to communicate the gospel as people enter the amphitheater. And that seemed to be, I mean, that's America, right? It's a public place. The amphitheater is public space, and in public space you can engage in free speech, and certainly religious free speech. The city, however, passed an ordinance doing like you described in Georgia, basically saying, oh, well, yeah, we're for free speech, but if you do it over here, away from the amphitheater, so that you're away from the people who you're trying to communicate a message to. And in that setting, Mr. Olivier decided he wasn't going to comply, and so he was actually arrested and charged with violating this ordinance. Now, what makes this case a little different and interesting is, can he challenge the law? Can he assert his First Amendment rights, that he has a religious and a free speech right to engage in this speech in a place of his choosing, not in a place in some box outside the area where he can't be effective. And there is again, this is another one of those, First Liberty, we've been targeting bad old precedents. And so there's a bad old precedent that says if you violate a law and you admit that you violated it, you can't challenge the constitutionality of the law in a later federal lawsuit. And so it's important because he did violate the law as written. The problem is the law's unconstitutional, and he should be permitted to bring that claim like anybody else in a federal lawsuit. And if he can't bring it, then how can you ever challenge this law? He can't challenge it because, again, he's not going to lie and say he didn't violate the criminal, the statute. And so because he doesn't want to have a criminal trial, he wants to challenge in a civil rights suit. So it's a little bit different, but at its core, you've got a city in Mississippi who's saying, we don't like this particular type of speech for whatever reason, and so we're effectively going to eliminate it. Well, you can't do that in America. Sure. And so we're hopeful. The Fifth Circuit was very close in whether they were going to take and review the case, the entire court. And so we had, I think, 8 judges who dissented from the Fifth Circuit, and that's a good sign. And there are courts of appeal who've gone the other way and said people like Olivier can bring this case. And so we're hopeful that the Supreme Court will take a serious look at this case.
Yeah, I mean, it needs to be corrected. I mean, people need to be able to exercise their rights, and if the city can use this really bad precedent to keep people basically handcuffed to not be able to challenge the law as soon as they say, well, yeah, I violated it because I think it's wrong, then what are we doing?
Well, and again, since you mentioned civil rights, let's take it all the way back to the 1960s. Martin Luther King Jr., the Southern individuals working for the civil rights of individuals. And again, if you could not challenge it because you actually were sitting at a lunch counter for whites only, or you've challenged it because you went into a whites only restroom, you can see the problem. And so if you don't think this through very quickly, you can recognize that makes absolutely no sense. Yeah,
and I think where this comes out of, and it sort of a little bit reminds me of the basis of the Groff decision. So if you remember our case, we're representing the postman Gerald Groff, and you had a Supreme Court decision in the 1970s, which was pro-employer. Because I think at that time they were concerned about, just all these plaintiffs' cases going against employers. Here, the target originally was not someone like Mr. Olivier. It really is prisoners sitting in the jailhouse, writing, who've been convicted of a crime, then writing a federal civil rights case. Yeah. And so I think that's where the bad precedent comes from, but it's being misapplied in this situation because Olivier is not sitting in jail. I mean, and yes, he violated the statute as written, but the statute again is clearly unconstitutional. He should be able to challenge it, and so we're hoping that this case is an avenue to get that fixed. And there's a way to write such an opinion that would not impact the decisions regarding prisoners sitting in jail.
Yes. And again, oftentimes the Supreme Court decides not to decide. They say you don't have standing or something like that. But it just seems to me to be one of those other precedents. And you've taken on a few, from the Lemon Test to the TWA case and all sorts of other ones. So might as well find another precedent to eliminate. And I guess if just we go to the break, let me just mention that, okay, if we're talking about free speech and freedom of religion, the next two articles really get into, well, what are the limits to free speech? I would suggest that taking over Trump Tower and threatening individuals, I think that crosses the line pretty good. And I would also recommend that if you wanted to talk about where the limits are, threatening the life of Elon Musk or blowing up or shooting into Tesla dealerships probably violates the kind of freedoms we have
and
there.
I think, and that's a perfect segue, Kerby, because if you think about Mr. Olivier, he's not destroying any property. He's not taking over a building. He's not obstructing. He's in a public space exercising his right to free speech and religious free speech. That is completely different than people taking over buildings of colleges, people taking over private businesses, people defacing things like Teslas and throwing rocks at dealerships, destroying property. And to me, look, we want to strongly protect free speech, but not when it crosses a line and you start destroying property. You literally stop obstructing people from going places. And again, that's why the Olivier case is so important. He's doing it the right way. Right. Let's not, I mean, literally the old expression, let's not throw the baby out with the bathwater. But that's what Mississippi's doing. And none of us would ever support what they're doing, occupying Trump Tower, occupying buildings on the campuses of Columbia. But they're probably not doing that anymore, and since they're losing their funding.
We will talk about that in just a minute. Nothing like a threat of losing all that money, but and we'll get to that in just a minute. Let me just mention that the first article we talked about is on the website. The second one, you can go to firstliberty.org to find that. If you would like to find these articles, like to know more about either Jeff or Erin, you can go there. And one other thing I thought I'd mention, I don't know how many of you stayed up late last night for the total lunar eclipse, but Parker Ing, who actually is a good friend of this ministry, founder of Day 4, which looks at kind of a creationist astronomy, also on the board of the Know Why podcast. We had Liberty on yesterday. We have probably one of the best pictures of the total lunar eclipse, which you could download if you'd like, and gives you a little bit of an idea, since maybe you did not get up that early in the morning or that late at night, or maybe it was cloudy where you were. It's on our website as well. Just another benefit we provide at Point of View. We'll be back right after this.
If you appreciate the trustworthy news and biblical worldview that you hear on Point of View, would you consider joining our team, the Truth Team? Listeners like you have been the backbone of Point of View for 53 years. But today there are more voices competing for Americans' attention than ever before, and few of them are anchored to biblical truth. By joining Point of View's Truth Team, you can be an integral part of keeping truth on the air. In just a few weeks, Point of View will celebrate Truth Team Week. But you don't have to wait till then. You can join the Truth Team right now and help us get a head start on our $150,000 spring fundraising goal. If you appreciate Point of View, please join the Truth Team. Join today by visiting us online at pointofview.net. Or you can call toll-free 1-800-347-5151. pointofview.net and 1-800-347-5151. Point of View will continue after this. You are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again, is Kerby Anderson.
In studio with me today, Jeff Mateer, Erin Smith, and if you'd like to join the conversation, 1-800-351-1212. Jeff mentioned just a minute ago the decision to actually pull for a very short period of time $400 million in federal funding to Columbia University, which caused the interim president, Katrina Armstrong, to say, you know what, I think we really need to make fighting anti-Semitism our number one priority.
How's that work?
If you don't see the light, you feel the heat. And that was a $400 million experiment that went only so long. And since we were talking about this idea of free speech, let's talk about each one of these cases. We have one about attacks on Tesla and threats of Elon Musk, also protesters at Trump Tower. You might say, why are they actually coming after Elon Musk? Because he has seen his stock price drop about 15% just the other day, and since December it's dropped almost 50%. And his if you will, sin is the fact that he's uncovering all sorts of things through Doge. Here's one to actually make Jeff's head explode. Turns out the Doge has found that more than $300 million in small business administration loans were issued to children under the age of 12, and another $330 million were issued to people older than 115. That's just the latest one. Of course, we won't even get into the funding of Nancy Pelosi's vineyard and a few others. But
on the children, I mean, maybe they were lemonade stands. I mean, I'm trying to think what else. You know, I guess you can't get funding for selling Girl Scout cookies. But no, I mean, like, who's behind this? Because this has got to be organized. I mean, like, a normal person doesn't just like wake up and say, you know what, let's go occupy, you know, a Tesla dealership, or you know, let's go vandalize some. I mean, what person does that? And why? What's his offense? Because he's rooting out government fraud and waste and abuse. Are these paid protesters? I mean, I don't want to be a conspiracy person, but what normal and I would, if anybody is listening to us and you're really upset about what Elon Musk is doing to the extent that you would engage in destroying private property, please call us, because I'd like to hear why. I mean, I really don't understand what kind of person wakes up and does. Apparently, they're not employed. I mean, who does this?
Well, you got to think, right? Like, the people that are upset are not just the people that are working in the government. The people that are probably the most upset are the people losing these contracts and all this money. But even, I mean, when I was working in state government, one of the biggest businesses these people can get into is defrauding the government. I mean, the people that are filling out these fake applications, I mean, they're losing out on a handsome stack of cash because Elon and his crew are actually looking at where the money's going and finding what's not legitimate.
But you think those are the actual, and protesters is the wrong word.
Yeah.
I mean,
these people
perpetrators.
These aren't just necessarily one-off people.
Whatever. Yeah.
They're organized criminals. I mean, there are enterprises that exist to defraud the government. And so maybe they are organizing these sorts of protests and throwing rocks and trying to scare. You're not going to scare Elon Musk. I mean, is he going to stop now? Because he got his,
we'll get to it later. They are starting to scare some of the people that are on the Supreme Court, though.
So I've been, generally I have a relative who bought a Tesla. I was intrigued that he bought one, but I've really never been, I guess, because being a Texas oil and gas, thinking I want, an automobile by gas. But now it kind of like I'm thinking, well, maybe I should get a Tesla to support Elon. And I bet maybe you can get a good deal. Like in California, you can get, with all the liberals selling their Teslas, maybe we can get a good deal on a Tesla. I don't know.
Maybe.
I mean, I just, But these people, I just don't understand it. Usually I can, it's an issue and you think, okay, I get it. But we're going to go after Elon Musk and Tesla because he's cutting fraud, waste, and abuse.
Yeah. And again, I predicted a while back that I thought there would be more controversy, which gets to our next article, over deportations than over Doge. And if you're not familiar, the pro-terrorism or pro-Hamas agitators, we'll call them that took over Trump Tower, were upset about the fact that you have a Syrian citizen, and that is Mahmoud Kahil, who actually has, first of all, he's not an American citizen, so you need to remember that. He has very radical ideas, and he was one of the leaders of the anti-Semitic, anti-Israel, anti-American riots at Columbia University, which we just talked about a minute ago. And so they're upset about the possibility that indeed he could be deported. And so that's why they took over Trump Tower the other day. But again, those may be more organized. What's your thoughts?
Yeah, he's here, and I think you emphasized the key point. He is not a citizen of the United States of America. He's here, I believe, on a green card. Mm-hmm. And one would think, having the privilege to be in this great country, that you can't organize activities that cause in the destruction of property, which is what he's engaged in, and to target a religious group of people, which he has done in his activities against Jewish people, where they're actually physically threatening them, engaged in violent behavior towards someone because of their religion. Again, I find this one, at least I kind of understand that could be a group of people who are upset about that. And so I can understand that people could be upset about that. But at the end of the day, he's not an American citizen. He's here, that's certain rights and privileges. And when you engage in what's essentially unlawful activity, when you engage in unlawful activity, well then guess what? You're no longer welcome in this country.
Well, and I'm not an immigration expert, but I'm pretty sure that when you get your green card, there are certain requirements that you have to continue to abide by. One of those is not to support terrorist organizations. And if we're going to declare that Hamas is they're terrorists, supporting their agenda is a violation of your agreement that you had. So you have your green card revoked and you can get sent back. And so there's a free speech concern that this could be used in some way by groups to punish someone for what they're speaking. This is not one of those times.
No. And it's back to the point we made. I mean, yes, we support free speech. But there is a line that is crossed when you engage in activities where you can't violently harass someone. I mean, there are lines, there are limits. It's not, we don't have unlimited rights. No. Whether it's practicing our religion or engaging in free speech. We would not defend someone who said, I have a religious belief, for instance, to kill my unborn baby. Mm-hmm. We would not support that. There are people who make that claim now, incredibly, that they have some sort of religious reason to kill their unborn baby. That the same way, when someone engaged in what they claim is speech, but is actually activity, and it's activity that's threatening, that's harassing, and directed at a group of people because they are religious. That's unacceptable, and there's no right to stay in this country. Mm-hmm.
Let me just mention that one of the callers was asking off air, and I'll just see if I can answer it, how much of the Doge activity is going to really reduce the cost of the budget. And again, I think we will see all sorts of savings here and there. Will that balance the budget? No, it won't balance the budget, but it's certainly significant, and it certainly gets us a little bit closer to having something that's close to a balanced budget, because if nothing else, for the youngest one in the room here, we don't want to put all of that burden of a national debt on them, and there are some solutions, which we'll talk about in just a minute, Senate to address some of those issues. But nevertheless, whether you save billions of dollars, just hundreds of millions of dollars to produce like a transgender comic book for Peru, I think most of us say that's probably not a good investment of our dollars. And sending money to the wrong people, whether it's Social Security that we found out, or this one from Small Business Administration, or a variety of other things, which, as the Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, said, many of these things under USAID not only did not advance the cause of America, in some cases it actually hindered the cause of the United States of America. So that's good to do, but it's going to be a long way from being able to balance the budget, which brings us to a very important issue after the break, and that is a lot of people thought we were going to have what was called a Schumer shutdown, that you actually would need 8 Democrats to vote with the Republicans in order to actually implement cloture and cut off filibuster. It looks like once he changed his mind, a few others have, and some of the Democrats have lost their mind over that one. We'll talk about this right after these important messages.
Thankfully, the predicted long wait to learn the 2024 presidential outcome did not come to fruition last November. But results for many down-ballot races were delayed, some for weeks. Experts warned that we have much more to do to clean up our elections. The Daily Signal's Fred Lucas points to Germany's recent election in which all votes were counted on election night. We should ask ourselves why we often can't do that here in the U.S. Mr. Lucas cites several differences between our elections and those conducted in European democracies. In many countries, especially parliamentary systems, the ballots are simpler. Germans voted for the party. The U.S. is a larger country with ballots which are longer and more complex. Plus, our system is decentralized. States run their own elections, creating most of their own rules. But the most consequential cause of delays in vote counting in U.S. elections is the widespread use of mail-in ballots. In his book, The Myth of Voter Suppression, Fred Lucas notes that nearly 3/4 of countries in the European Union don't allow mail-in voting without specific reasons. According to J. Christian Adams, president of the Public Interest Legal Foundation, these countries have in-person voting at the polling place and have results on election night. What's more, he says, every European country except Britain has voter ID requirements. In the U.S., several states lack this fundamental protection. Election law attorney, author, and podcaster Cleta Mitchell founded the Election Integrity Network, a coalition dedicated to the security of every American vote. She recommends several common-sense protections. One that should be a no-brainer is, do not let non-citizens participate in our elections. A federal bill requiring voter ID, the SAVE Act, awaits a vote in Congress. Ms. Mitchell also says we should return to Election Day and precinct-based supervised voting and paper ballots. For more, see votefair2026.com. For Point of View, I'm Penna Dexter.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Back once again in studio with us today, Erin Smith and Jeff Mateer. If you'd like to join the conversation, 1-800-351-1212. Let's kind of put this in perspective. We, at midnight tonight, run out of money because there's what is known as a continuing resolution. You hear people talk about a CR. That's what the CR is. And it was passed in the House. The question was, what would happen in the United States Senate? You have 53 40 Republicans. 52 of them would vote for that continuing resolution. Rand Paul said he would not, which means if order to get cloture, you, of course, need 60 votes. So that means you needed 8 Democrats. One of those, which was John Fetterman, who is becoming a little bit like sort of a part-time Republican on some of the comments. Who would have ever predicted that one? But you still need 7 others. And then when you have the Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer finally saying last night that I believe it is my job to make the best choice for the country to minimize the harms of the American people. Therefore, I will vote to keep the government open and not shut it down. And Jeff, of course, we've talked about government shutdowns before, and I know where you come down on the issue, but the bottom line is this was not going to work well for the Democrats because the argument seemed to be in order to save the government, we're going to shut down the government. And I just don't think that works very well trying to explain it to the American people.
No, and Schumer has gotten played.
Oh my goodness!
By Mike Johnson, our former First Liberty colleague, and now Speaker of the House, and Donald Trump. Because, I was thinking this. I think I wouldn't want to play poker with Donald Trump. I can tell you that. I think I would like to play poker with Chuck Schumer, because he put himself in such a horrible position, and I think it took him, that a meeting with some other Democrats saying, which is exactly what you said, like this is not going to end well, and the fact that he even brought it up first, then it lets his far left flank just really go after him. So I jokingly said this is I think the first time I've ever agreed with Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, because I wanted the Democrats to shut down the government, because I think a government shutdown actually would not be bad for the country, and it would be disastrous for the Democrats. And I think when we talk about government shutdown, it does not mean like, we no longer have a military and people aren't going to get their Social Security checks. No, that's not what it means. Everything that is essential gets done. And the word essential, it's like the Princess Bride. They really don't know what that word means because essential is really broad. Now, having said that, if you're not essential...
Elon Musk wants to talk to you.
Yeah, send your email, right? We want to hear, like, you're not essential. Like, what are you not doing that needs to be done? Well, there's nothing that needs to be done. And so, I was rooting for the shutdown because I wanted to see what would happen. And I think Schumer finally figured that out.
Yes. Again, Erin, Princess Bride reference here, but nevertheless, essential or inconceivable are, again, the idea. And I think if nothing else would have played in the hands of Elon Musk, because he could be pointing next week to individuals sitting home, theoretically not doing anything, and is saying maybe we didn't cut the various cabinet posts and departments enough. And so, again, this was not going to play well for the Democrats, I don't think.
Well, right. And I think, there were plenty of people looking forward to taking, to use the Tesla analogy, if we're going to stick with the Elon Musk theme, take this lean version of the federal government for a test drive and see, does it work? Can we continue to operate as a country? And then you've got all the proof points you need. And it just goes to show, right, government's bloated and it's too big. And so we might as well just, let's knock it back down to size. It's AOC saying this is going to eviscerate the federal government. Wasn't that what we kind of we wanted to make it smaller?
I agree with exactly what you're saying. What I'm wondering, the government is the deal that the Republicans, and it's a lack of understanding. We're cutting, but we're really not cutting,
no,
right?
We understand.
We're cutting the increase that we're not. Again, it's only in Washington do you cut something that actually causes there to be an increase.
Right.
And they feel good about that. We've cut. Well, you cut because, and so that to me is a little frustrating. And the other thing that's right, they're kicking the can, not for 30 days, which is what Schumer, I guess, originally
was trying to do. Yeah.
But now they're going to kick it to the fall.
Yeah.
I mean, what happened to the good old days when you actually passed a budget and then you funded it and you had full debate?
Well, let's give full credit where credit is due, and that is the House of Representatives on a number of occasions actually have passed a budget. And it's not easy to do, unlike the Texas legislature, which you're familiar with. You just pass an overall budget. Here you have to pass basically 12 budgets, but they did that in the House more than once. Then sent it to the Senate, and nothing happened. And the reason nothing happened is because Chuck Schumer was ahead of it, or all the way back there, Harry Reid was ahead of it. And now maybe John Thune will do that, because once you get a budget, then you start asking questions. Is this budget justifiable here? And of course, the other thing that Elon Musk is trying to address is the fact that if you haven't spent all your money, you've been around bureaucrats long enough to know this story, then you spend it very quickly so that you can justify getting an increase next year. And that's where the head of the EPA actually pointed out that what was happening, and one of the people in the Biden administration even said we were just throwing gold bars off the Titanic because they were trying to spend it off as quickly as they could. And so if there's another benefit of the DOGE program, the Department of Government Efficiency, or Elon Musk and his minions, it is the fact that they may eventually end some of that for the very first time. You've worked in the bureaucracy. You know what that's like.
Sure. I mean, I was not involved with any financial decisions that were being made
you
whatsoever.
Were not throwing any gold bricks off?
No gold bricks for me. I have had an experience like that with my, college meal plan. It gets to the end of the semester and you're like, oh man, I got to go to the store and get, I don't know what I'm going to buy, but I have to buy it all because my money is going to go away if I don't spend it. So, I mean, it just disappears into nowhere. The university gets to keep it. So I wasn't going to have that. I mean, I was going to do right by my parents and go buy 5 pounds of beef jerky before I let the university take any more money.
So there you go. And I know bureaucrats that say that they do that every year. And you've seen it in the state of Texas. And you know it in
saw
Washington,
it and had people admit that's, well, we've got to spend this money, Jeff.
Yeah.
Because if we don't, they may cut our budget next year. So we don't need it. But we're going to spend it so that we can cut. Yeah. And no, it does happen. It happens in small scale. And I think back to one of your earlier points. I mean, does this, how much the caller's question that was communicated off air? I mean, how much is this going to save? Look, if it saves anything, it's a start. And the truth is, it is going to save, and it's going to add up in the millions. But yes, we've got a huge spending problem. But this is a first step, and I'm hoping the next step is, and I been very, very, I mean, just overwhelmed at what Musk has been doing with the president's permission. But maybe this is the first step that will actually submit a balanced budget. What a radical idea. Something that in Texas we have to do.
Every state has to. We're going to take a break. When we come back, we've got a piece by Cal Thomas on the economic roller coaster. We're going to get into that in some detail. And then ICE arrests doubled and many other issues that we will cover in the second hour. We will be back right after this.
It almost seems like we live in a different world from many people in positions of authority. They say men can be women and women men. People are prosecuted differently or not at all, depending on their politics. Criminals are more valued and rewarded than law-abiding citizens. It's so overwhelming, so demoralizing. You feel like giving up. But we can't. We shouldn't. We must not. As Winston Churchill said to Britain in the darkest days of World War II, never give in, never give in, never, 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 never yield to force, never yield to the apparently overwhelming might of the enemy. And that's what we say to you today. This is not a time to give in, but to step up and join Point of View in providing clarity in the chaos. We can't do it alone, but together, with God's help, we will overcome the darkness. Invest in biblical clarity today at pointofview.net or call 1-800-347-5151. Pointofview.net and 800-347-5151. Point of View will continue after this.
I just wanted to tell you, too, how much I have appreciated Point of View over the years. I've always been taught that we take care of our own, and I feel like Point of View is one of our own because of the Christian worldview that you do promote. And so I have become a partner today, and I just want to thank you so much, and just God bless you for all that you do.
Listen, I wanted to make a quick comment. I'm a relatively new listener to the show, and I really kind of stumbled upon it more than anything because I'm doing some driving now that I wasn't in the past. And my comment really is, I think you guys and gals are more right on about the assessment of this country right now than anything I've heard. You know, I go home and I tell my wife, you've got to hear what they're talking about on the show. It's just so right on. And I tell my parents the same thing.
I'm 25 years old, and I started listening to Point of View about 4 years ago, and it has changed the way that I think and the way that I view the world around me.
Point of View Radio Talk Show.
Hi, this is Kerby Anderson. You know, each day we take on the tough issues and provide a biblical perspective to them. The topics we cover are wide-ranging: apologetics, theology, prophecy, creation and evolution, intelligent design, marriage, family, child-rearing, the millennial generation, trends in society, politics, economics, business, religious liberty, the Constitution, public policy, foreign policy, military policy, tensions in the Middle East, abortion, homosexuality, pornography, sexual ethics, media, technology, history, and America's godly heritage. We talk about anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View continues right now.
Across America, live. This is Point of View. And now, Kerby Anderson.
Second hour today, if you'd like to join the conversation, 1-800-351-1212. We are going to focus some time and attention now on the economy. This piece by Cal Thomas is one you might want to read, because it's a reminder that in some respects, he says, we've been here before. For those of you that are younger, let me give you a little history lesson. For those of us who are older, we lived through it. And that is when Ronald Reagan took office in 1981, they were able to pass what was called the Economic and Recovery Tax Act, and it was to reduce the tax rate. But what happened is it was painful for a while, and I'd forgotten this, but Cal Thomas reminded us in here that by 1983, Ronald Reagan's approval rate was all of 35%. But by the time of November 1984, it had soared to 61%, and he won every single state except the one that Walter Mondale was from. So in some respects, there's a need to understand that maybe, as Donald Trump has talked about, wait and see, that is the case. Also quotes from an individual that I've used as an illustration sometimes on this commentary that I do, Charles Gasparino, saying, think of the U.S. economy as a junkie weaning himself off of heroin, which is never easy. It's been addicted to the heroin of government spending, both monetary and fiscal, for so long that we're running $2 trillion deficits when the economy is growing near 3% with low unemployment, and of course goes on to the other aspects of that. In case you don't know, you can go to the U.S. debt clock and see, as we've talked about before, that we bring in $5 trillion, which was the budget just not too many years ago. It was about $4 trillion just before the pandemic. $5 trillion would cover it, except for the fact that we are spending $7 trillion. Sometimes people have trouble getting their head around it, but imagine if, let's take some zeros off, you were making $50,000 a year, but you were spending $70,000 a year, and you had a credit card debt of $360,000, you'd say, I'm in some trouble here. And so there is an attempt right now by Donald Trump to change some things in terms of tariffs, in terms of the tax rate, in terms of even allowing Elon Musk to go into these various departments. And Erin, if nothing else, I want to make sure your generation and even the generation after you are able to pay their bills, because we are loading more and more debt on the backs of future generations, aren't we?
Yeah, I mean, I talked to my friends about, we're getting to the point where it would be nice to buy a home or things like that. And so it's not economically feasible. I mean, you can get there if you're really smart and you've saved and done all those things, and you are taking care of the debts that you have. You are paying off your credit card. But I mean, it was getting to a point where there needed to be change, and the American people on the whole saw, okay, something needs to give. We need a new president. We need new leadership. We need the economy to be fixed and taken care of. We need someone who knows how to balance a budget. And so that's part of, I think, why they elected Donald Trump, because he knows how to run a business and knows how to do these things. And so, but yeah.
Secretary Treasurer Scott Bessent, I think, gives me a lot more confidence than Janet Yellen, and I'll talk about that in just a minute. But some people say, how did we get here? And I did this the other day, but it's worth mentioning one more time. Just before Trump left office, Congress passed the $900 billion so-called COVID relief bill. That was $900 billion, almost $1 trillion. As soon as Joe Biden got into office, he said, well, we have to spend more. And so we passed a $1.9 trillion American Rescue Plan. Then, even at the time, you had the former Secretary of Treasury, Lawrence Summers, used to be the president of Harvard, saying, I think this is going to lead to inflation. Turned out he was right. Later that year, then they passed a $1 trillion infrastructure bill. And then Biden was not through. By the end of that year, wanted to actually spend $2.2 trillion in a Build Back Better Act. Well, even the Democrats started to say, well, that's too much. So they called it instead the Inflation Reduction Act. And you can see what happened, because in a short amount of time, we spent, billions and trillions of dollars. Even when we first dealt with that, we spent $89 billion. And to put that in perspective, I looked this up the other day. If you spent $1 million every single day since the time in which the Declaration of Independence was signed till now, that's $81 billion. We passed that in one day. And so when people realized that almost 40% of the money circulating around was created under either the last part of Trump or mostly under Biden, no wonder we've had inflation.
Yeah, and and you hit the point. No wonder we've had inflation. Why do we have what for most of our lives unprecedented, except during the Carter years that led into. And I think Cal Thomas's article points out, and I do remember, of course, I was in high school during the first part of the Reagan administration. And I remember the gasoline lines, as you probably do, Kerby. I do remember the double-digit inflation and high unemployment. And obviously, we're complaining about mortgage rates today because, we've been the beneficiary of, at least I was. I think my mortgage was something like 2.25 or something incredible.
You did well.
And now, they're at 5 or 6? Is that about where they are? And people complain about that. But I do remember there was a time when mortgage rates were 16%, and I think my first house that I bought after law school with my wife, I think our first mortgage was in excess of 8, and we thought that was a good deal because coming out of the 80s. But let's not think back also before COVID hit, where the economy was and what the President Trump had come in his first term and had focused on. In his phrase, making America great again, right? And had put a lot of time and effort into the economics. And the economy was roaring going into then COVID, and COVID shut it down. The solution, whether it was Trump at the end of his presidency or certainly during the Biden, is not more government spending. Mm-hmm. We know that that's not the solution. The solution is not more government spending. The American economy is incredible. Despite all this inflationary, it still continues to be robust and gone. But there are good. If we can get, and that's what, gosh, I can't say how excited I am about the stuff that Elon Musk is doing, because I think this is the real first step to getting a handle on this. And it's been, the overspending has been the elephant in the room, and to see actual Republicans engaged in this, I know the Democrats don't care, but seeing Republicans engaged in this and actually doing things, I think that's a great, great first step.
It is amazing to me, some of the people that Donald Trump has brought in this time. Some people have said if he had just had two particular terms, he wouldn't have been as effective as he was by being out by 4 years and coming back and simply saying, of course, I just mentioned Scott Bessent, who is the Secretary of Treasury, and think about the Secretary of Commerce and all sorts of other individuals. But I want to come back and give some good news on the economy, because if you open up your newspapers, you're going to say doom and gloom. and also some very significant challenges ahead that unfortunately this president has inherited. We'll talk about that right after this.
This is Viewpoints with Kerby Anderson.
A recent education report illustrates that our public schools are politically skewed. It concluded that the Marxist Howard Zinn's book is used in a fourth of all American classrooms. Educator Larry Sand explains that Zinn's best-selling book, A People's History of the United States, approaches history from a Marxist perspective. Zinn maintained that the teaching of history should serve society in some way and that objectivity is impossible and it is also undesirable. Zinn even admitted that he wrote his book to create a revolution. If you want to know more about Howard Zinn and his education project, you can follow the link to this commentary. Even better, you might want to obtain the book Debunking Howard Zinn, written by Mary Graybar. I did an hour interview with her on the book a few years ago. Larry Sand concludes that most students are becoming an expert in Marxist dogma, but they aren't learning U.S. history. The American Council of Trustees and Alumni conducted a national survey of college students. It tested them about their basic knowledge of American history and government and found that significant numbers of college students graduate without a basic grasp of the nation's history and political system. He also cites other surveys that come to the same discouraging conclusion. In many cases, foreigners who come to the U.S. to become citizens learn more about our history and government structure than young people who attend our public schools. Why not require high school students to pass the citizenship test? Recently, the governor of Iowa announced a bill that would require high school students to pass the citizenship test to graduate. If the bill passes, Iowa will become the 14th state to adopt such a measure. Our schools aren't teaching history, and what they do teach is often politically skewed. I'm Kerby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
For a free copy of Kerby's booklet, A Biblical View on Socialism, go to viewpoints.info/socialism. That's viewpoints.info/socialism. You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Back once again, if you'd like to join the conversation, 1-800-351-1212. Erin Smith with us and Jeff Mateer. Let's go out to Georgia first. Mike, thank you for joining us today.
Hey, thanks, Kerby. Thanks for taking the call. Just a quick comment, or a couple, I guess. A lot of us are really applauding what Elon Musk is doing. I'm older than you are, by the way, so we'll remember some other times. But just wanted to give the panel an old saying that some of us have had over the years. When I went to a Braves game or a Falcons game and wanted to get a beer, and it was like $8, the comment was always the same. That's fine, because I need the beer now. I'll eat hamburger helper next week, but we got to do this now. And I think that's kind of what the American people, for the most part, are looking at. Let's put up with this, because there's better things to come.
I think so.
And I hope they continue. I will tell you that from my standpoint, I certainly support President Trump and everything that his staff is doing. My new personal hero is the vice president, because
yes.
we
turned
just
out pretty good,
somebody,
didn't he? Yeah.
Oh,
J.D. Vance
doesn't take any guff, and I think that's something that we really needed, and that's my comment. I won't belabor, but it's we're going in the right direction.
I think so. Well, again, Jeff and I love to go to baseball games, but boy, anymore when you want to buy a hot dog or anything, I said, I'm not trying to invest in the team. I'm just trying to feed my family, but it is amazing.
Yeah, and so a disclosure. So I was at spring training last week.
I knew you probably were.
And went to 3 different stadiums. And I'll tell you, prices, I mean, it used to be that they had been kept kind of the prices down at spring training, but now they're creeping
in Surprise, Arizona.
In Surprise,
yeah.
and we went to a game in Goodyear and in Scottsdale, and they're the prices are no longer reasonable. Although I did notice they had a deal where you could bring your family of 4 at Surprise, sit out on the grass, and I think it was for $50 for a family of 4,
That's
which
good.
included Cokes and hot dogs. And I was looking for 3 other people to go with me because I thought that was a great deal. My wife said she didn't want to sit in the grass out in the field, so I had to find 3 to add to that. But I mean, I can't imagine. I'm looking forward to opening day for the Rangers, but the prices keep going up, and
That's right.
and I'm always and I like eggs. Let me give you the egg prices now. Tell me the egg price.
Yes. Well, Brigitte Gabriel has been on the program. I usually don't use her for economic news, but she said, first of all, egg prices today are $4.89, and they were $6.55 on January 21st. And where she is, I can't remember, but they've dropped about $2 per person. Inflation is now 2.8%. Instead, it was up over 3%. So that's actually encouraging. Gas prices are the lowest level in 4 years, and mortgage rates have fallen for 6 weeks in a row. So, yes, you hear a lot about the stock market, and we started the week by talking about the stock market dropping almost 900 points on Monday. But even when we're talking about maybe having to deal with some of the economic pain to get to the success, there are a lot of very positive stories that aren't being covered by the mainstream media. But off air, Erin made a comment that your generation, and let's say all of us, are in the microwave generation. And boy, if we can't see a change that happens, they're already starting to say, Donald Trump, what's wrong here? And he's been in office, 54 days? Is that all we've done so far? And we're expecting him to turn the economy around on day one? That doesn't really happen that way.
That's right. You can't seem to decide if we want, they can't decide if they want Donald Trump to succeed or if they don't, because he can't seem to win either way. I mean, we're seeing lower prices at the grocery store, all sorts of things like that, and suddenly it's still not enough. But we also don't want him to be able to do his job, to be able to affect the changes that we're seeing. So let's just let it work out. Be patient. I mean, the economy is not a bowl of ramen noodles that's going to be ready in 2.5 minutes. So let's just chill out and wait and see what happens.
Yeah, I don't like those ramen noodles things.
I mean, in defense of Hamburger Helper, I feel I owe it a duty to defend. I love Hamburger Helper.
Well, there you go. That is good. Let me just, before I take another phone call, say that there's another issue on the horizon, and you'll hear it here first. And that is, we have all these treasuries rolling out right now. We have $36.5 trillion in debt. How do we fund that? Well, we sell these treasuries, and up until now, China, Japan, Saudi Arabia, UK want to buy those treasuries. Does anybody think China's going to buy them? No, they're not. And they're more rolling off than any time in history due to the previous secretary. Who was that? Oh, that was Janet Yellen, at a time when you could have had long-term treasuries, like 10-year treasuries. She just did a lot of 2-year ones. So we have $7 trillion of treasuries that are now coming out on the market that somebody has to buy. who's going to buy them unless the United States buys them. And when that's the case, then they have to print money to do that. So one of the things that's been proposed is to actually create what are called bit bonds, use Bitcoin with the bond itself. You get an interest rate that's like 1%, which is below the 4.3%. But over time, there is 900, say you got $1 trillion, 900 billion goes to the bond and to paying off the debt. But the other 100 billion goes to buying Bitcoin. At the end, then, as it appreciates, you get the upside price of that up to 4.5%. And then once you get to that, it's a 50-50 split between the bondholder and the government. You might say, why are they doing that? Because you have to find some way to sweeten the interest, because right now, nobody wants to buy those treasuries. China's not going to buy them. Japan can't buy them. I mean, Japan's in its own economic set of circumstances. So this is a situation that was dumped on Donald Trump by the previous Secretary of Treasury, Janet Yellen. And all through the fall, one of the things I did was talk about all the issues, no matter whether you elected Kamala Harris or Donald Trump, that you would have to deal with in 2025. And just think about that, because it's $7 trillion, but we also have a $2 trillion deficit. So we have to actually sell $9 trillion worth of treasuries within this year. And I don't think anybody's talking about it except a few people on Wall Street. And you hear it first here, and I'm going to probably do a commentary on it because it's another major crisis that the Secretary of Treasury, the Secretary of Commerce, and most importantly, President Donald Trump's going to have to deal with.
No, and that's, I mean, and I always think it's funny that people are complaining, Trump's been, what would you say, 53, 54 days in office, and now anything is his fault. That's probably his fault too. But don't forget, for 4 years during the Biden administration, anything that went wrong was Trump's fault.
Oh, it was all Trump's fault.
When in doubt, blame it didn't matter. I mean, like, the last day of the administration, anything wrong? Oh, yeah, that's Donald Trump's fault. And so I agree with what Erin's saying. Let's let this play out. And I again, fascinated by this whole government shutdown, because Trump and Speaker Johnson, I mean, they played Schumer so well on this. And
you and I've known Mike Johnson, and I didn't know he had it in him, but he has been able to herd cats there in the House of Representatives.
I mean, I remember when I was with Kelly Shackelford, and Mike had just been elected Speaker. And he made a comment to us at this time, well, we'll see how long this lasts. And I think that, I mean, and realistically, I mean, in this environment where you've got to keep the Republicans together, and there are a lot of strong, different personalities in the Republican caucus, and he's done just a phenomenal job at that. I mean, again, it's easy to sit on the outside and criticize, because I can look at the deal that they passed, and I can be critical of. I mean, for me, I'd like to see a lot more cuts in spending, but he had to get all the Republicans, because he's not going to get any Democrats.
Yeah,
so,
which is a
job.
sad commentary. Not one Democrat wanted to stand for the State of the Union address, all those great things to stand for. Not one Democrat was interested in preventing a shutdown of the government. We'll see how many Democrats show up in the Senate, but I think we'll have enough. We'll take a break. We'll take some more phone calls. All that coming up right after this.
If you appreciate the trustworthy news and biblical worldview that you hear on Point of View, would you consider joining our team, the Truth Team? Listeners like you have been the backbone of Point of View for 53 years. But today there are more voices competing for Americans' attention than ever before, and few of them are anchored to biblical truth. By joining Point of View's Truth Team, you can be an integral part of keeping truth on the air. In just a few weeks, Point of View will celebrate Truth Team Week. But you don't have to wait till then. You can join the Truth Team right now and help us get a head start on our $150,000 spring fundraising goal. If you appreciate Point of View, please join the Truth Team. Join today by visiting us online at pointofview.tv. Or you can call toll-free 1-800-347-5151, pointofview.net, and 1-800-347-5151. Point of View will continue after this. You are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again is Kerby Anderson.
Back once again, if you'd like to join the conversation, 1-800-351-1212. As program note, let me just mention that next week we'll have Reggie Littlejohn will be in studio. We'll be talking about China, talking about digital surveillance, the World Health Organization, so many different issues. Later in the week, we'll actually be doing a whole focus on China. A lot of that comes from Tom Cotton's book. And our issue this month is on the subject of China, so we'll certainly cover that in a number of different ways. Let me also mention that, as I did just the other day, we have our good friends at WPEO. They're going to be holding a banquet for celebrating their 55th anniversary. And I had a chance to talk with the general manager of WPEO, Paul Scott.
We're very excited, Kerby, about our 55th anniversary banquet. We were excited about 50 years, but 5 years ago we were right in the throes of COVID and couldn't do anything at all. We just couldn't, and so we want to take advantage of another, big number, 55, and just celebrate what the Lord has done through WPEO. This is not a banquet to toot our own horn, but to express our gratitude for how God has guided this radio station over the last 50 years. If people when people who would like to come, they just head to WPEO.com. You have to scroll down a wee bit, click on the 55th anniversary banner that is scrolling across the screen, and that will take you to a screen where you can decide what entree you want. We're going to have a very nice meal that night. We're going to have a good music program, and then we're delighted that you've decided to come speak to us that evening.
Again, I'll be speaking there. Also be speaking, of course, at our friends in California, KYCC. We'll talk about that more in the future, but take the time to find out about that. And again, WPEO.com for those of you, at least in central Illinois. Let's go back to the phones in Georgia. Peggy, I think you have a good question for our roundtable guests.
Okay. I'm an 85-year-old widow. I worked 50 years, retired at 65. I paid into Social Security for 50 years, and now I pay monthly for Medicare. It's not anything that is being given to me by my government, I feel like. I never received any unemployment or government assistance. But now I struggle to pay increasing property taxes and property insurance on my home of 50 years. My question is, will any of these government employees or elected officials be tried in courts for their fraud and thievery? And I don't understand why the American people aren't angry as hell about all this thievery. Thank you.
Yep. And I'm surprised that we don't see sort of counter protest right now against the people that are against Doge, because it's our money and it's being spent inappropriately and in some cases spent fraudulently, isn't it?
Yeah, no, and I agree with the caller, and thank you for calling in and speaking out, because what you're saying is exactly right. If someone has engaged in fraud, waste, and abuse, that is a criminal offense, and we shouldn't look the other way. And I think, Kerby, you said it. I'll give you the credit because you said it off the air. Normally, the answer would be, we just have ignored that, and we haven't held people accountable. Maybe that's the reason why we're in the shape that we're in. But Kerby, say what you said off the air. But we've got a new sheriff in town.
Well, we do. We have Pam Bondi, and
it's not Merrick Garland.
And it looks like she is going to. And matter of fact, she's taking numbers, and so we'll see where that goes. But you worked in an attorney general's office, and of course, both of you have legal background. It does seem to me that there is cause. And as I've said before, one of the people we oftentimes have on this program is Dr. Merrill Matthews. Oftentimes hold up his book, which came out years ago, documenting fraud and abuse and waste in Medicare and Medicaid, which are entitlement programs. And as a result, it does seem to me that Elon Musk is being pilloried and vilified for pointing out what we've known for some time. And you can go back to times when Bill Clinton and Al Gore were working in that, and it used to be a Democratic issue. But for some reason, Democrats don't seem to be that interested in it anymore. What about this?
Well, I mean, I think that they've, benefited from all of the money that's being spent by our government, and a lot of times in really, really wasteful ways. But I think, the important thing to remember for, those of you that are listening and for the American people writ large, don't stop talking about it. Let's not let this fall by the wayside. Let's make sure let's ask that these people be held accountable so that this doesn't happen again. Because when someone is made an example, other people watch and they say, well, I don't want that to be me, so I'm going to watch my step. And so Peggy, you're exactly right. Like, we should be raising alarms and talking and saying, let's hold these people accountable. This isn't right.
Well, again, one of the things that we often make available to you is our Take Action. We'll probably switch that out again because we do believe that there are some action items for that. But let's, if we can, just before we run out of time here, talk about the fact that not only do we have DOGE, that's one of the Ds, we have deportation, which is another D. And I would have guessed back a few months ago that the real outrage would be about all the ICE arrests. But so far, most of the protests have been about DOGE. But I want to give you some good news, just as we talked about the fact that gas prices are decreasing, wholesale inflation is down, consumer inflation is down, mortgage rates are down, egg prices are down. There's something else that is up, and that is the number of arrests by ICE, because the Immigration and Customs Enforcement agents have made 32,809 migrant arrests between January 20th and March 10th. So essentially, Donald Trump has doubled the number of arrests of individuals who are here illegally. And as we've talked about before, Tom Homan, who is basically the border czar, and we don't always like to call people a czar, but the border guy, nevertheless, has said we're going to take the worst first. And when you look down this list, these are individuals that you really don't want in this country. And so this is good news for the average American, isn't it?
I mean, it's nice to be able to think, oh, I could maybe start walking the streets again in some of these larger cities where we were seeing, migrant crime, and for these families that have tragically lost members of their family because of someone that should have never been here in the first place. I mean, this is great news. It doesn't fix what happened, but it can help those in the future be more protected and feel safe in the country that they call home.
And it also goes to the point, and I think the vice president, the previous caller praised Vice President Vance. And one thing he said that he said recently was, well, maybe we didn't need any new laws. Remember that one of the excuses that the Biden administration gave was, oh, we need new laws. That's why. No, we just need to enforce the laws that we have. And it's, in the first 50 days, they've demonstrated that you can enforce the laws and you can actually start to make a difference. But still, there's a lot of work to be done. And a lot of more efforts need to be done to stop that really is a non-existent border, unfortunately.
Let's, if we can, just before we take a break, give you at least one way to look at this. The Trump administration has been very involved in where we are right now in the state of Texas. And of the 540 criminal illegal aliens they've captured, let me give you a quick rundown here. 140 criminal aliens charged or convicted with violent offenses, including homicide, aggravated assault, or domestic violence. 34 criminal aliens charged or convicted of sex offenses or child sex offenses, including rape or possession of child pornography. 38 criminal aliens convicted of illegal firearms offenses, including aggravated assault with a firearm. 52 criminal aliens charged or convicted with drug offenses. 51 criminal aliens charged or convicted of property crimes. 93 criminal aliens charged or convicted of drunk driving. I'm kind of glad they're off the road and not going to be walking around there. And Erin, like you said, having been in Georgia just recently, in Athens, Georgia, you think of Laken Riley and all sorts of other individuals who are no longer with us simply because some of these individuals who came here illegally are individuals that are perpetrating crimes in this country.
Absolutely. I mean, there is a legal path to being here in this country, and I have a lot of friends that have taken that legal path. And I am proud to share America with them. Like, they are great. We are a country full of immigrants. We're made better by people that come here the right way.
And if we address illegal immigration, we can have more legal immigration.
Well
Exactly.
said. Yeah.
Exactly.
Very good point. And so, again, if you are not familiar with that, this one actually comes from Newsweek magazine, so you know it must be true. Donald Trump doubles the ICE arrest rate for the first 50 days. Again, pointing out that even if you do follow this out, it leads to at least 1 million people that might be deported. And it just shows you that when we talk about, first of all, I don't believe there's just 11 million undocumented immigrants or illegal aliens, but whatever it is, it's going to be a long-term process. But as they say, a good first start. Let's take a break. We've got more to cover right after this.
Thankfully, the predicted long wait to learn the 2024 presidential outcome did not come to fruition last November. But results for many down-ballot races were delayed, some for weeks. Experts warn that we have much more to do to clean up our elections. The Daily Signal's Fred Lucas points to Germany's recent election in which all votes were counted on election night. We should ask ourselves why we often can't do that here in the U.S. Mr. Lucas cites several differences between our elections and those conducted in European democracies. In many countries, especially parliamentary systems, the ballots are simpler. Germans voted for the party. The U.S. is a larger country with ballots which are longer and more complex. Plus, our system is decentralized. States run their own elections, creating most of their own rules. But the most consequential cause of delays in vote counting in U.S. elections is the widespread use of mail-in ballots. In his book, The Myth of Voter Suppression, Fred Lucas notes that nearly 3/4 of countries in the European Union don't allow mail-in voting without specific reasons. According to J. Christian Adams, president of the Public Interest Legal Foundation, these countries have in-person voting at the polling place and have results on election night. What's more, he says, every European country except Britain has voter ID requirements. In the U.S., several states lack this fundamental protection. Election law attorney, author, and podcaster Cleta Mitchell founded the Election Integrity Network, a coalition dedicated to the security of every American vote. She recommends several common sense protections. One that should be a no-brainer is do not let non-citizens participate in our elections. A federal bill requiring voter ID, the SAVE Act, awaits a vote in Congress. Ms. Mitchell also says we should return to Election Day and precinct-based supervised voting and paper ballots. For more, see votefair2026.com. For Point of View, I'm Penna Dexter.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Erin Smith and Jeff Mateer in studio with us for just a few more minutes. And last article that we have here before we get to Penna Dexter's commentary by Ann Coulter. Don't quote her too often, but this one was very good because she points out that right now when some people are upset about Trump thinking about another pardon, reminds us of the blanket pardons that went out to 1,500 criminals and then commuting sentences another 2,500 individuals. These 4,000 criminals, as she points out, interestingly enough, went to prison only after undergoing a lengthy, meticulous, painstakingly fair process in the, as she said, the most advanced criminal justice system in in the world, so many obstacles are thrown in the way for prosecutors, exclusionary rule, Miranda rights, double jeopardy, jury nullification, on and on and on. He says it's a miracle they got their conviction, and as a result, just pointing out that some of these come from a plea bargain. We did spend some time on Tuesday talking with Keisha Russell, one of your other colleagues here, about her book, Uncommon Courage, and even got into some of the aspects in one of her chapters on the whole issue of the criminal justice system. We do have a booklet on criminal justice system, but it was more on the criminal justice system that Ann Coulter's talking about. But Keisha brought up a very good set of issues about the prison system, so maybe we'll do something like that in the future. But I thought you might want to see that, because just about the time you're hearing all sorts of hue and cry and frustration about the fact that Donald Trump may want to pardon someone else, you have to go back and look at the 4,000 individuals. These are not people that are here illegally. These are people, in many cases, most cases, I would have to say, are American citizens, are out on the streets because we either pardoned them or gave them clemency. Isn't that amazing?
Yeah, it is amazing. And you know, I agreed with, you know, her point that these people have gone through the system, the process, the criminal justice system. Is the criminal justice system in America perfect? No, but it is the best one we have.
Mm-hmm.
And so to the extent that, you know, people are upset about, you know, Trump deporting people and then pardoning people, they're not upset about Biden doing the same thing of releasing these people back into our streets after they've been convicted of a crime. And Jeff, you brought this up while over break. I also hadn't thought about the plea bargain aspect of this.
Yeah, that whole last section there just talks about how they'll plea bargain down to something that just says, well, maybe the actual crime was assault with a deadly weapon, but they'll plea bargain will be distribution of narcotics, or actual crime is rape, but possession of narcotics. And so in some respects, they get out earlier, and that's another thing that I certainly want to address maybe in the future when we get into this issue of criminal justice.
No, and I think what's trouble, so you think about, usually pardons are individual situations where someone has gone into, looked at the file, and made a decision, you know, this person, you know, they may have committed the crime, they were unfairly prosecuted in some cases, or they've done something since then that they merit for being released. That's not what President Biden did. What President Biden did is he a large swath of people, they didn't look at all 1,500 or 2,500. They're just saying, we don't like this law that these people were prosecuted and convicted by a jury, or they agreed to it through a plea bargain. We're just going to wipe that out.
Yeah.
We're either going to grant clemency or we're going to commute the sentence. And so, I mean, to me, that's just against the rule of law. Yes, a president, a governor has the ability to pardon, but it's supposed to be an individualized process.
Yeah.
Here, it's just, we don't like the law. It has nothing to do with the person. And that's, I think, Coulter's point is, look, this guy could be a rapist who for some reason pled to something less. You know, in the system, we're just going to let him, we'll get him on that. He'll go to prison. He'll serve some time. But here, and then Biden comes in not knowing what the situation is and just and commutes the sentence. So I think that, to me, this is just, it's against the rule of law. It just it because they don't like a law, then we're going to take away any punishment associated with the law we don't like, whether that means it's the death penalty or it's drugs. Well, Congress or a state have passed laws. Those laws should be enforced.
I don't think we're safer because of it, and that's why I think she brought that up. And I just thought, again, since we had talked about the number of ICE arrests doubling, I thought the Ann Coulter one was just good to just talk about pardons. And I know the two of you are actually working in constitutional areas, not criminal areas. Although I remember Holly Randall saying, I didn't think we'd ever have to deal with a criminal case, and then you have the one in Ohio, right?
Well, when they start putting pastors in jail because they're serving the people on the streets trying to get out of the cold, then you become a criminal lawyer.
I just get such a kick out of that. You guys never thought you could be doing criminal justice, and all of a sudden you have to defend a pastor.
Mm-hmm.
It's just amazing. So again, if you want to know more about some some of those cases at First Liberty. But real quick around the round table here, Penna Dexter is not here, but she has talked about this idea of if we can have cleaner elections. And that's another issue that oftentimes, Erin, we've talked about. And it just says that other countries, if they want to have safer elections, don't send out mail-in ballots, and they require certain kinds of regulations if you're going to get even a provisional ballot. And we have thrown so many of those things out the door, and it seems to me that now's the time to see if we can fix some of this.
I mean, this is just let's just return to common sense. If you don't want people to cheat on something, let's watch them and make sure this is not. You know what happens when teachers send home a take-home test? I mean, you can't watch those kids all the time. The same principle applies to voting.
Well said.
Bring people in and let's vote in person and make sure that's the person that's supposed to be voting with that ballot.
Yeah, I mean, I think I've said this before. I think there should be election day.
Yes.
That's the day you vote on. I think there should be paper ballots. They seem to be the easiest to keep track of and to count. And, I think about those pictures that we all saw after Iraq was liberated and the Iraqi elections. I remember you seeing all the people with their purple thumbs. Well, what a way! What a unique way. Let's actually have people. And look, I'm for purple thumbs. Let's have people go. Let's have people go. And a radical idea, just like I flew back yesterday into DFW, and when I, of course, showed up to get on. What did I have to have? My ID. When I walked into a federal building, what did I have to have? My driver's license.
There you go.
What a radical concept for voting. Actually establish that you are who you are and that you happen to be a citizen of these United States. And guess what? You get to vote on one day. And I'd even be for it. First I wasn't, but I think I am now for this. Let's just make it a national holiday.
Make it a holiday.
Let's make it a national holiday, and everybody votes. You have plenty of time. Polls will be open for 12 hours, and everybody, let's just go vote and celebrate America on yet another holiday. But and Erin knows because she works for me, at least indirectly works for me. I'm not a big holiday, but. Yeah, let's give a holiday. Holiday.
Can I pick what color my thumb is? Does it have to be purple?
Well,
I mean,
yeah,
it's like.
I think, appropriate now, depending on the party in control, maybe you have red or you have blue. How about that?
Which ballot do you want? You just hold up your thumb, red or blue?
Pretty good. Well, we're just simply out of time. Erin, thank you for being here today. And Jeff, of course, always appreciates you. And most importantly, I want to say thank you to Megan for her help engineering the program. And I might just mention that, again, if you'd like to listen to the program, you can click on the button that says Watch or Listen. And, of course, she's also put together some great point of view highlights on Spotify. Also want to thank Steve for his help. On Monday, we're going to be talking about China, and a lot of that will be next week. Enjoy the weekend. We'll see you back here on Monday on Point of View.
Do you know anyone who would appreciate a news source that is anchored to God's Word and not to a political party? Do you know someone who wishes they could hear today's most confusing questions addressed with biblical clarity? Do you know anyone who wishes they felt equipped to make a difference in this nation? Well, here's the good news. Point of View is anchored to God's Word above all else. Point of View tackles every issue of the day from a biblical perspective. Point of View equips Americans to take action. And you can bring Point of View to more listeners. Make a difference today by joining Point of View's Truth Team. We'll start our official Truth Team campaign in a couple of weeks, but you can join right now at pointofview.net or by calling us toll-free at 1-800-347-5151. Again, join the Truth Team at pointofview.net or 1-800-347-5151. Make a difference today. Point of View is produced by Point of View Ministries.
I do appreciate Point of View and what you folks are doing. You really are doing a great job to educate and to help Christian folks do a better job to honor Christ in all that we do.
My husband and I are your supporters. We just really appreciate the show and the people you bring on.
I just want to commend you guys on your program. I love listening to you.
It's a blessing. Been listening to you for several years. Your program has helped my family see current events and elections and politics through the eyes and the principles of Scripture. And that's been enlightening, and we're trying to pass that on to others.
I want to say, first of all, that I really enjoyed the Millennial Roundtable, and I love the program altogether. I think Kerby is great, and I really appreciate all of y'all, all that y'all do, and the truth that y'all put out.
Hey, great show. Love all your comments and what you're talking about.
Thanks again for what you do.
Point of View Radio Talk Show.